Okay, everybody, we have everybody in the meeting, so we're going to get started here. I want to introduce to you retired Colonel Mark Volk, who served 26 years in the military, serving here and abroad, including stints in Bosnia, the Middle East, and North Africa. Colonel Volk was in the Pentagon at the time of the terrorist attack on September 11, 2001, and his office was narrowly missed by the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. He was awarded the Soldier's Medal, the Army's highest non-combat award for heroism, for his efforts that day. Colonel Volk joined Lackawanna College in an administrative position, and because of his organizational skills and passion for the job, he rose to the position of Lackawanna College president, where he demonstrated growth by vision, decision-making by full inquiry, and leadership by example. Colonel Volk is affectionately known as not your average college president. Colonel Volk's leadership clearly demonstrated his priority being the people of Lackawanna College, especially the students. I'm excited and honored to introduce to you retired Colonel and past Lackawanna College President, Mark Volk.
To kind of throw back some history there, Veterans Day really sprung out of what was known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day being the formal day that recognized the end of World War I. So, that was established. It was back in 1918. It was the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. But by about the middle of the 50s, they began to realize that while we had days out there to recognize various people who had served in the military, they really didn't have one that looked at all veterans. So right now we have generally three types of ceremonies, 3 days that we recognize individuals who served in our military throughout the year. The first one is Armed Forces Day. And typically Armed Forces Day is always around the day of commencement, always falls on our commencement weekend. And so it actually caused us to have to change commencement from Saturday to Sunday because they shut the traffic down around the college because of the parade that typically happens in Scranton that day. So that's an impact to us that we have always had at Lackawanna. The second one is Memorial Day. Memorial Day, Armed Forces Day is the day that we recognize individuals who are currently serving. Memorial Day at the end of May is the day that was set aside to recognize those individuals who died in service to our country, who gave their lives, who made that ultimate sacrifice in combat. In support of our nation's wars and support of our country and our democracy. And then the last one now has become Veterans Day, that day in November where we recognize anyone who has served. And that could be someone, like me who served, a career, some people serving in excess of 30 years. If you go back and look at our history way back at the Revolutionary War, where soldiers could sign up for the early Federal Army for as little as 6 weeks at a time. So you could have a 6-week enlistment, and at that point, go back home from there. And so that's what Veterans Day is. Again, was celebrated just the other day. What I wanted to do that I thought might be interesting for you is to talk a little bit about some of my experiences and really tie that to leadership for you. Each one of you out there as a member of an athletic team, you work in and around a group of people for which leadership is very important, whether it's you as the leader or it is, the quarterback of your football team, or it is someone else on the basketball court, who is your leader that controls the offense or controls the defense as you move through a game. So I think what I've found over time is that good leadership is good leadership. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. And so what I want to do is kind of spend a little time talking about that with you. And I'll give you a little of my history so you understand where I come from, since I think that's most important. You really need to understand context. And then when I finish up, we'll have some time for questions and stuff. So a little bit about me. I was actually born not too far from here. I'm down in Easton. I don't know whether we have any of the folks, any of our athletes from Easton. We occasionally bring someone up out of the Lehigh Valley. I'm a a Red Rover, an Easton Red Rover. So any of you from, Allentown, Becca High, any of those schools, or the dreaded Phillipsburg. If we have any Phillipsburg folks out there, the state liners, you'll be in trouble, as they always were when we had them on our football team. I went to the University of Scranton, right up the street, came here in 73, graduated in 77, and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army. For me, as you'll find with many people in the military, I entered the military not really thinking that I was ever going to be there for a career. I went in there because I was looking for a job at the time. I was graduating from college. I got married at the age of 19 when I was a sophomore. My son was born later that year. And so for me, this was an opportunity, kind of looking at how can I put food on the table. And I can go back and I could talk to the idea of, service to nation, service to country. My father served in the Korean War. He was an end of war Marine. And so I kind of grew up looking and, thinking about the whole issue of service. Service, not necessarily in the military, but service, from the perspective of service to our nation, service to others. I think that many of you have done those things, whether it's just, as your team has reached out from that ability when you give back to others, you really get a great feeling from that. And so I think when you can do that, that really opens up possibilities for you. So for me, the military became that part of service. And as I stayed in, I kind of gravitated to it and found that, I guess I was kind of good at it. I was good, I did well as a leader, and I was able to grow and be promoted through the system. So I spent a total of 26 years on active duty. As an Army officer, you're given a specific focus, a specialty, a branch, as we call them. I spent 13 years initially in field artillery, large cannons, missiles, those things. I was also trained during a time in what they call the Foreign Area Officer Program. And that's where you're trained to be a regional specialist around the world. And you might serve at an embassy in another country or serve as a staff officer where you provide guidance to combat officers, combat commanders on the implications of, that interaction with foreign nations. My specialty was Middle East, North Africa. I spent 2.5 years learning Arabic. أتكلم شوية من العربية الآن. I speak a little bit of Arabic still. A year of that was out in Monterey, California, a hardship tour out there on the coast of California at the Defense Language Institute. And then a 1.5 years in North Africa and Tunisia, which was then the Department of State's Advanced Arabic Institute. And I spent a lot of time that 1.5 years, not just learning Arabic, but immersion language training and traveling throughout the Middle East and across North Africa. I also did 2 tours in Germany. My first tour, 77 to 81, or 78 to 81, and then 94 to 97. I was back in Germany again during that time. Very typical to what military officers or Army officers do. We command at various levels. Leadership is built into everything that we do as an officer. As many of you find that you are doing on the court or on the field, leadership is key. And so as a military officer, it was embedded into us, inculcated into everything that we did. So formally, as an artillery officer, I commanded a field artillery battery, which was then a tactical surface missile-to-missile with both a high explosive and a nuclear warhead capability. And that was in the mid-'80s. I was out at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I talked about, I had that first 13 years in artillery. And then while I was serving with 7th Infantry Division out of Fort Ord, California, again in Monterey in the early 90s, I blew a knee out. And that almost caused me, many of you athletes, you know what that's like. You hit that wall, right? There's an injury and somebody tells you you're done, you're out. Well, that hit me with my Army career. They told me I was done, couldn't serve anymore. And I had been like 13 years and I fought my way through that. And what I found was I was able to convince the doctor that if they let me transfer to what we call the non-combat arms, for me, it was military intelligence, that I was able to stay in, right? So the physical qualifications were listed as less. I absolutely did nothing, change my routine. I was still doing the same thing, just with a little more pain when I did it. But so those last 13 years, I was in military intelligence, and I was very honored to command a military intelligence battalion in the mid 90s, mid to late 90s there in Germany. 2-year tour. We deployed to Bosnia in 96 as part of the UN peacekeeping force that went into Bosnia during that time. And my battalion provided direct support intelligence to a 23,000 soldier infantry division in Germany, a combat infantry division. And so we provided both electronic surveillance and jamming capability, as well as interrogation and ground surveillance radars and counterintelligence operations to that organization as well. My last few years I spent then with Headquarters Department of the Army and the Pentagon on the senior Army staff. I had a year out that I went to National War College, which is the highest level war college. The various service and the National War College is the highest level of military education that they have for officers. I joined Lackawanna in 2004, having retired, not really understanding how I was going to make that transition. I'll talk about that in a second. And then I actually was very blessed to become president on July 1st of 2012. So, this is where I came from. I was an officer in the Army. This was taken out at close to Fort Ord, California, it's probably about 1992, I guess. I was the executive officer, the number 2 officer in a military intelligence battalion right after I had branch transferred, as I told you, wearing what we called the light fighter do, that helmet with shredded pieces of uniform over the top, and the mutant ninja turtle face paint that we used for camouflage all the time. And so, I went from, kind of being that steely-eyed killer to finding myself here at Lackawanna College. And I don't know whether any of you have ever seen the movie Animal House. If you have, you might recognize Dean Wormer. And if you haven't, I won't encourage you to watch it, because it'll probably give, the administrators there at the college a little bit of angst when you see everything that went on. But I kind of went from really knowing exactly who I was and what I was doing as a military officer, thinking, how do I make this adjustment? How do I now move into higher education, something that seems so totally different? Higher education administration and working with students every day, and faculty and staff and administrators. How can I do that? And so it took me a little while to, I sat down and I started thinking my way through, and, are there things that we could look at? And I'll just look at this very quickly with you. You talk about leadership and what it is, that process of influencing others to accomplish the mission, right? And as opposed to management, the process of acquiring and assigning priorities and allocating resources. And I think if you really think about it, management is a part of leadership, right? So as a leader, you're leading a lot of things, but that also includes people. You are managing people as a leader. You're managing resources and allocating those as well. So a leader is definitely a manager. A manager, though, is not necessarily a leader. And you probably have seen those people who have been great managers along the way, but they weren't necessarily good leaders or good coaches for you, because they might not have had that spark. So the Army kind of found its way through what they call the trait theory of leadership. And that basically says that there's a bunch of traits that exist that leaders, effective leaders, military leaders in this case, have. And I'll talk to about those in a second real quickly. But the theory says that leaders are born and not made. Don't necessarily know if I agree with that. I think that there's probably some inherent ability in people that maybe they are leaders, and some might not be able to learn those skills. But I think realistically that you can develop those skills over time if you're committed to it, you work towards it, and you look at those things that are important as leaders. But for me, as I came into higher education, I started looking around and said, at this point, the college was only a 2-year college. We were the equivalent, of a 2-year community college, private 2-year community college. We had not begun offering the baccalaureate degrees, which came later in my tenure. And so I found a study that was done. It looked and said, what are the great traits of effective community college leaders back then, right? And so you can see those listed there. So vision, integrity, confidence, courage. I won't read them all to you, but keep those in the back of your mind because I think you'll see later something that I want to relate back to you. So these are the traits that the Army used in its old theory of those things that make effective leaders. So you go through those, there's 23 character traits that exist out there. You can kind of read through them again on your own. Some of them might jump out to you, but I would bet that if you think back to people that have been good leaders that you've worked with before, or people that you've heard of or seen, you can probably find fault with some of those people. Because I will tell you that I don't necessarily, I'll commit to the fact that I don't have 23 of those character traits in me. I'm better in some than others, I think I have a sense of humor, but some of the others are not as good. And if you think through, you think some of those classic leaders, if you ever saw the movie Patton or World War II, thought about that. Patton didn't have a lot of tact. People that are very forceful and outgoing and say what they mean. And so they might not be so tactful, but they're just great leaders. There are things that just jump out. So there are probably certain ones of those that are more important than others. But in reality, you need to have some of all of that, I think, in order to be a good, effective leader. So I then went back and I found another study that I looked at, and it went back to 2003, and it looked at leaders in combat. So they did a study of soldiers in Iraq and said, tell us the components of good leaders who led you in combat. What were those 10 traits of a trustworthy leader? So go back and, if you look at those, and I highlighted the, critical ones probably more so in yellow, but then look down at the ones, if you remember that report I showed you from effective community college leaders, right? There's a lot of congruence there. There's a lot of sameness between the two. And I think what that really tells you is good leadership is good leadership. So if you're thinking about how that impacts you as a leader in athletics, or as you think about as you move ahead in your career, the traits are the same. The things that will make you a good leader on the court or on the field are the same traits that will make you a good leader in business or as a teacher or as an administrator. They're the same things, right? There's a commonality. So one of the things that I think you need to do as you move forward, and one of the reasons I think this is important is none of us think about the what's next for the most part. We get caught up and say, right now, all of you are in college, you're looking forward to, your whatever program, athletic program, and you're thinking about that. You're thinking about the what next, moving on to that next level, to that D1 level scholarship, that chance to go to the pros, something that's out there. But I can tell you it's going to come to an end, right? You're going to have that devastating injury like I did, that's going to cause you to rethink, or you're going to get to the end of whatever your time is, and you're going to have to say, what's next? What do I do next with my life, and how do I fit that in? And so again, you are all developing leadership skills through what you're learning through athletics, and those things that you are doing in college as well. They are setting you up to be individuals in the future who can lead, manage organizations in various forms as you move out there. But I think one of those critical things that you got to figure out is, what kind of leader am I? Where do I fit? And if you look across, you can spend years and years reading leadership books. What I found that was most easy for me was to sit down and say, okay, how do I see leadership? Well, so, I was a history major in college. I hate math. I did it because I had to. It's important. Do it. Do the math that you have to do. It's important. You might think you'll never use it. You will. It'll be there. But what I try to do is really kind of boil down leadership to the very basics for me. And so what I did was I said, okay, I started with a line, and I think if hopefully, Eric, give me a head nod. Can you see my cursor there? Okay. All right. So I started out with this one line right here, right? So left to right. So on one end of the spectrum is a laissez-faire type leader. That's the kind of person who really doesn't lead. They just kind of like, you have a great organization, just say, all right, here's what we want to do. Go forth and do it, right? Very hands off, doesn't get engaged in much of anything. And then on the other side of the spectrum is the Kita theory of leadership. And I would bet most of you don't know what that is. That is one that we used that you think the military might use a lot. It's called the kick in the ass theory of leadership. And that's that leader who leads by, screaming, yelling, berating you, tells you everything you have to do. And you've probably seen this coaching, right? They're just not good leaders. All they do is intimidate you to try and do better. And while it might work for a short period of time, ultimately it'll fail. People will reject it. They'll fall against it. Yeah, I think most of the times when people think of military leaders, they put you up here, right? They when I ask people to say, where do you see me as a retired Army colonel on this scale, they default over to this Kita theory. And I can tell you, there are very few military officers. There are always a few that can make it, but there are very few that have survived by being a Kita theory person. You just can't do that. So what I really kind of came to over time is that to be an effective leader, you got to be able to go from end to end. Because, like for me, I was blessed, in most of my time, not necessarily within the college, but probably in the last 6 years of my presidency with a team, some of them are sitting here, right here today on this Zoom meeting, who were just tremendous leaders, executors of policy, coaches. They were just tremendous. And so I could I could function down here pretty well. Here's what we need to accomplish, and then turn everybody loose. So this is not just, though, a matter of how you deal with an organization, but it's how you deal with people, an individual person. Because there are days when we all need this. There were days when I needed somebody, whether it was the board or whether it was Dr. Murray, your current president, who was my executive vice president, to just come in and kick me in the ass, say, hey, come on, you need to step it up. We all need that sometimes. So one, you need to figure out, how do you do that? Two, you need to figure out where you fall on that spectrum. And you can really find out that really well by asking other people where they see it. So, and again, I'll feel free, Joya, Eric, if you disagree with me, I tend to function more on the laissez-faire side than I do on this side. I'm much more comfortable down here than I am on the other. I can get there, and I've done it. There's probably a couple still infamous times around the college where doors were slammed and I had a pretty heart-to-heart discussion with somebody, but that was rare. It wasn't necessary, and I'm not comfortable up there. I much prefer to be down here. The other line is your organization, right? Or it's that person. It's where they are at that time, and it changes. Every time someone left the college, we got a new vice president. This kind of changed a little bit, right? We had to kind of go back and look as a team and say, where were we? What do we need to do? And how do we change that? So again, think through how you see leadership and how you fit into those things. And if you do that, I think that will help you in the future. I'm going to go through a couple of things quickly here and then turn it loose for questions. I think there's some important things that you need to do over time. Right now, many of you, for athletics, it's your passion. It's the thing that keeps you going. It might be the reason you're at the college. You found this great opportunity to move on to that next level. For some of you, there's something else out there that you're thinking about doing that's in your passion for you. This gets thrown a lot. It's hard. I didn't know it at age 18. I didn't really know at age 25 or 30. I don't think really. I knew I liked the Army, and I thought I was good at it. It wasn't until I was probably about in my mid 30s, a little younger than that, maybe 32, I guess, that 34, that I realized that I wanted to stay in the Army. for a career, and I had that opportunity. But then what else is out there? I would just think about that. What excites you? Because if you can find that thing, and it may not be a passion, but you can find that thing where whatever that next for you is. If you can find something that makes it exciting for you to get up, not every day will be a great day. I'll talk about that in a second. But if you can find those things that make you happy, you can find that thing where you feel like you are being of service. You are providing a value to others, as you find now when you do those service projects. That just kind of warms your heart, and it gives you that reason to get up every day. For me, I was blessed because I not only had the military as a career, but I found that, I absolutely loved my time with the college. I loved my time spending with you, the students, and the athletes. There was nothing more fun than, being on courtside or being on that football field and watching all of you excel. I love talking to students in the halls, interacting on Facebook and those things. And it's the thing that, if you ask me what I miss most about the Army, I miss the interaction with soldiers, and I miss that with the members of my team. If you ask me what I miss about the college, every day I miss interaction with students, with athletes, with my administrators, with the faculty. It drives you. It really does. It made me want to get up every day. I think, we learn all through our career. If you ever give up learning, it's over. You shouldn't do that. You need to find ways to, keep yourself going. And retirement now, I do a lot of reading and try and catch up on things. So you can control your destiny by, again, thinking about these things up front, putting yourself in a position. What courses do I need? What degree do I need? Where do I need to go? What type of job could I get? Where should I be in an athletic field? What position is best for me? Where am I well suited? Where can I excel? Those things help you to control your own destiny instead of someone else deciding always, what is going to happen to you. Network, the people you meet now, your coaches, the administrators, they're there for you. I still and always make myself available to write letters for students or to, provide input for them. That's just part of why I'm here and something that I can think it can be of value to. So use those networks when you have them. Ammunition conservation probably sounds kind of strange because it's a military term, right? And the folks that have worked a lot, you only have a certain amount of time, you have a certain amount of resources, you have a certain amount of dollars, you have a certain amount of energy. You have to know where to expend it and how to expend it. You can't go after everything at once, right? You've got to target those things that are most important to you. And as an athlete, where do you need to be at the right period of time and how do you expend that energy in order to be successful? So think through that. You also need to think in depth, right? So not just what's happening today, but what about next week? So planning, your schedule, planning when your projects are due, when you have to get things done because you also have athletic commitments. Thinking in depth about not just this year, but next year, 5 years from now is important. You're not going to be 100% right. You're not going to get it all right, and you can't think through everything. But just starting to think about it, I think, will help you to open ideas and come up with different things that will help. Just the last couple of things, take some risks. You have to take risk. Nothing is gained in life without taking risks. It's just part of living and learning. We make mistakes, right? Don't be afraid of mistakes, yours or others. You got to have fun in life. Again, I try and approach most things with a sense of humor. People can tell when I really get upset because my sense of humor does disappear at that point, but that rarely happens. That very rarely happens. And then take care of yourself. I'll go back to the Volk principle last because I think it's something that it impacts all of us. So, I'm going to kind of spell it out here. It doesn't matter who you are, where you went to college, who your parents are, how much money you have, what kind of car you drive, what your education is, what your salary is, what your position in life is. None of that matters because some days it's just going to suck to be you. Some days you're going to get up and it's not going to be your day. Things are going to go wrong. You're going to hit a failure point. You're not going to have something come your way. You're not going to get that offer that you were really dying to get. But overall, life is good, because the next day, it's somebody else's day for things to suck. Or maybe it's next week or next month. The whole idea is just to keep focused, keep working hard, keep focused on what you're doing. Don't forget that you are all student athletes, not just athletes, you're student athletes. And as a student, something I always said, you've got to be a student first, because that's what allows you to continue to be an athlete at the college level. You got to maintain those grades. And beyond in life, you've got to have that to fall back on once that end comes. And it will come, whether you make it into the pros ultimately or not. It will come at some point where you're going to need to have something else to fall back on. And I turn it back to you, Eric, and what you guys want to do with me.
Colonel Volk, we greatly appreciate the information today. I can definitely relate to the Volk principle, so I can really appreciate that.
We've all had those
days. For the student athletes, I'm going to allow you guys to unmute yourself. I do ask that you also show your video when you do ask a question. So you can shoot a video, or you can shoot a question to Colonel Volk either through audio or through the chat. So now is the time to ask those questions, either regarding Colonel Volk's service, his leadership at Lackawanna College, and any of the things that he just presented to you. So I encourage you to ask those questions now. And please don't ask them all at once.
Yeah, they're deathly quiet, right?
And like I said, if you don't want to ask through the audio, feel free to ask through the chat. And I'll convey that information and that question to Colonel Volk. Whoop, he says he can't unmute. Let's see. You should be able to now. Colin, do you have a question?
Yeah, I got one.
Go ahead.
My teacher asked me this the other day. You think leaders are born or made?
Yeah, right. So it really is an interesting question. If you go back, if you remember that slide that I showed you about the trait theory, the trait theory is based on the concept that leaders are born, not made. There's another theory, the behavioral theory, that is the opposite, that says leaders are not born, that they are developed over time. In my experience, both in the military and then at the college, I think there's probably a mix, that there are some people who just naturally come by some leadership abilities, right? Or they were kind of thrust in them, whether, say athletics and football, so your quarterback on offense is typically going to be your key leader, but that's not always the case, right? Because sometimes, he's not up to that task. Sometimes there is someone else who becomes that leader for you. And while he may direct the offense, there's someone else that kind of gels people together. And then there's someone typically on the defensive side, who fulfills that same role. They may or may not be natural leaders. They may have just kind of found their way into those things. And I think over time, you can develop those skills. So whether you think it's, you need to have certain traits, or, you need to act in certain ways. I think, again, there's probably some of all of that. If you go back and you look at those traits, I think those traits offer a lot of good ideas about those things that people look for in people who lead them. I think one of the biggest things is integrity. There were few mistakes or few things for me, whether it was at a combat or in a military leadership role or at the college. There was really only one line in the sand for me. The one mistake that you could not make, and that's integrity. Don't lie. Don't lie to me, because if we can't trust each other not to lie, if we can't trust each other that what you're going to tell us is true when we're not being shot at, right? When there's really no threat, we're just going to get in a little trouble because we did something. If I can't trust you then, how could I ever trust you, right? So, and life ultimately comes back to the ability to trust. You have to trust that your teammates on the field are going to carry out those tasks that they are given in the execution of play. You have to trust that your friends are going to do the things that they are telling you you're going to do. When you get into the work environment, that your colleagues are doing what they're supposed to do. Once you give up that trust, it's near impossible to get back. So again, I think there are things that you can learn and develop as a leader over time that if you focus on. And again, they'll come back, I think, to things of personality and, to your commitment to learn, to be open, to communicate. People don't like that Kita theory of leadership where they're constantly yelling at you. You will find that even in the military, most times we're actually very collaborative. We're collaborative leaders. There are times, though, when you can't be, and those times when you have to step in and just lead. And again, you see that in athletics. There are times when you can talk things through, and there are times when you've just got to execute. So whoever is calling the play, you all need to execute. You don't have time to talk about it. It's because you've worked together, you've developed that trust and confidence in each other over time that this is what I've got to do. And then there are times when you can step back and say, hey, wait, maybe we could do something a little different. You all know when those times come, and those leaders will step forward. So again, it's a great question, and it's one I don't think anybody's ever answered. There's a lot of opinions out there. For me, I tend to think it's a little bit of each. Thanks.
Jay Wright, you have a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I guess you call it like leaders and tangibles. Like, so say someone may not necessarily have those leaders and tangibles developed yet. How would you go about, strengthening those skills so that you can become a better leader?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you've got to put yourself in situations where you have those opportunities to lead, right? So you can do that both informally and formally, so when you are, whether you're, say, in athletics or you're in a group or you're part of a club, you can work on those types of skills. Again, a lot of them are communication skills, I think, being able to effectively communicate to each other, to be able to share ideas, to listen. I think good listening as a leader is important. So putting yourself in those positions when you can to be that leader. Sometimes it's just a matter of, you recognize a void. If I think back over the various football teams that I saw in my 16 years total with the college, the ones that were the best weren't always the ones that had the most talented individuals. They were the ones that worked together the best, that had those kind of formal and informal leaders in them who would step up when they needed to, who would recognize all of a sudden there's a void. Somebody's got to step in and take control of what's going on. You just had a bad play, or, there's a fight about to break out, between your offensive line and the defense, right? And somebody's got to step in and break that up, because it's going to ultimately come to no good, as we saw at least one time, in the college's history. But it's taken those opportunities, I think, Jay, that will help you. Sometimes it's just, joining a club, being part of a club process or student government or something like that, putting yourself in those positions and then volunteering to take those opportunities to be part of a leadership group. No one expects perfection. It's just, it never happens. I am far from, or was far from, a perfect leader. I made mistakes all the time. It is finding, I think, those good people that you can put around you that help offset your own weaknesses, and then helping to guide them to develop them as a team. I think probably if the best thing that I was ever able to do was maybe develop people to be better leaders than I was. So again, I would say putting yourself either through those formal possibilities or informal possibilities when you have those opportunities to step in and just kind of develop those skills. Again, key to me would be communications, listening, right? Listening to other people and being able to take some of those the pieces of guidance so that they don't feel like you're just trying to stick yourself in and constantly, kind of force your ideas on them. But I think there are plenty of opportunities out there for you, and you'll find them if you look around. Another good question. Super.
Do I have any other questions out there? If not, oop, Dej, I got you, Dej. Go ahead, try it now, Deja. What's your question?
Okay, all right, it's working. I was gonna ask, was there ever a time when you were serving that you felt like the outcome of whatever you were about to like overcome wasn't going to be positive, or it wasn't going to work out? Was there ever a time when you lost faith, or you just kept faith and kept pushing?
Often, again, you go into a lot of things. I think one of I talked a little bit about earlier about taking risks. Okay, so if you wait to do things until you're 100% sure that you're going to be successful, you're not going to have a great life. Because very few things in life are perfect. Actually, probably nothing in life is ever perfect. But there are a few times when you can operate with 100%. So there were a lot of times things that happened that I just wasn't sure what the outcome was going to be. And there are times when, things looked like they weren't going to work out well. And there are times that I've had failures in life. I think, we can look around the college and we over the time that I was there with the college, we put a lot of things in place. A lot of changes were made, and we worked real hard to kind of change the college and, make it more effective for all of you, as students and as athletes, to, kind of really up the game in our programs. They didn't all work, and there were times I had to go back to our board of trustees and say, well, sorry, that didn't work. But I think you should always try and do things, even if it is a risk, if the outcomes that you could potentially achieve are positive, are those which will lead you more towards your mission or more towards success. Not every deep pass that you throw is going to be successful, but over time, if things work out, more often than not, or those key ones are going to be there for you. And so taking that risk, taking that chance, I think is going to outweigh the ultimate costs of those failures. Sometimes you're going to get picked off, right? It just happens. Sometimes it sucks to be you. And so when those days happen, you just realize that's part of life and you step up and you keep pushing forward. I think, again, that's you learn that as athletes. You learn that, not every time you're out there, you're going to win. But overall, you're going to put together good seasons and things are going to work well. It's a commitment that you make. And I think you'll find that's a commitment in life. That's a commitment in business. And again, if you can kind of surround yourself in a situation where you got good teammates, you trust those individuals around you, and you're having fun, then life is going to be really good. And those days when you're going to have failures, then they're going to come, 100%, I'll guarantee you. They happened to me in the military, and they happened in the college as well. That overall, they're going to work out more often than not.
Andrew Bostic, you have a question?
So I want to say, do you believe in order to be a leader, you have to not care what people think about you? What's your opinion on that?
I'd like to say that you don't have to it's hard not to care what people think about you, right? I think that ultimately what you have to do is get to that point where you say, I'm a leader, I'm put in a position, I'm confident enough in myself, and I know that not everybody is going to like you. Not everybody's going to be happy with what you do. And it's not a personality contest. That's not why you're there. I think you can be a leader where more people than not will like you just because of your approach. And again, I think that's effective communicator. It's someone who's a collaborator. It's someone who has fun, right? Who can enjoy what they're doing. But I had an old boss that I used to work for an infantry general, two-star, went on to be a two-star general, commanded the 82nd Airborne Division. And he used to end every one of his meetings by saying, if the enemy's not shooting at you, you're not trying hard enough. So move out and draw fire. So, you can understand that in a military context, right? But in a civilian context, it's true. It's the same. If you're out front, if you're a leader, if you're doing those things that are on the cutting edge, if you're out there pushing the envelope, not everybody's going to be happy with you. And you're going to draw some fire. People are going to kick back at you. So in reality, not everybody is going to like you. And, could I tell you that I'm, I don't care? No, I do. I know that I can't make everybody happy, but it bothers me when people don't, for whatever reason. I take it personally. But I know that ultimately you've got to just do what's right as a leader, as a person, and you have to do what you think is best. And sometimes that's not going to make other people happy. So be the best leader you can, and I think you'll find that more people than not will be happy with you. They won't be happy every day. And I know that happened still as college president. There are times that I had to make decisions that made people unhappy. That's part of being a leader too. You just have to do that. You have to do ultimately what is best for your organization, what is best for the college, the team, my unit, whatever it was. And that's not always what's best for an individual, and somebody's going to be upset in that case. So, again, it's part of leadership. It's part of what's going to happen. But I also think that if you do care, it says something about you, that you really do have an affinity for others, and you try and really do want to overall make people as happy as you can. Great question. Love these questions.
Well, I'd like to ask you a question while we're waiting for some other students to jump in here.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm curious to know, was there, in all the experiences that you've had, was there a defining positive or negative experience that really kind of molded you and your leadership skills? Whether it be in the military, at the college, was there ever a defining moment or one experience, positive or negative, that really contributed to leadership?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to I guess maybe peg down one or two, because I think they kind of happen over time, where there are kind of epiphanies or points in your life where things become more clear for you. So I'm trying to think from a military perspective. There are several, but one more humorous than others. So at one point, I was very much considering, I was going to get out of the Army. I had decided I was going to leave. It was I was about the 10-year mark. It was actually down at Lafayette College, down in Easton on the ROTC department staff down there teaching. And, I'd come out of, I told you I'd commanded an artillery unit. I'd come out of command there, I was responsible for 200 soldiers and a nuclear capable missile unit. And I went to teaching ROTC. It was like, what am I doing here? And so I was going to get out. And I had worked with a headhunter company down in Philadelphia that specialized in placing junior military officers. I was about ready to go buy a suit because I had my first interview set up. And I was going to interview for a project manager position with Frito-Lay Corporation. And I woke up in the middle of the night, kind of just sat dead up in a sweat. And most of you, Eric, you might remember this. Most of the other folks won't, but there was this old TV show, I Love Lucy. Does that make sense to you, Eric?
Yep.
So in this, in one of the sequences, she and her friend are working on a factory line, putting chocolates, bonbons in boxes. And so the boxes slow down and the bonbons speed up, and to the point where they're like, stuffing bonbons in their mouth because they're trying not to have them hit the floor and stuff like that. In a panic. And for me, it was, there were too many Fritos coming down the line and I didn't have enough bags to stuff them in. And I sat bolt upright and I thought to myself, you know what? This is not what I want. The Army is what I love. It's what I want to do. And so I think from one career perspective, that was one, right? So the other one then is on the opposite end of the spectrum. And it happened probably, I think it was about 9 months after I took over as president. And it occurred when we had one of our students shot and killed on the street outside, just up by the student union. Had gotten involved in an altercation with an individual that lived there in the Scranton area, and ultimately that individual pulled out a pistol and shot and killed our student. And I found myself the next day there in the morgue at Scranton, holding the mother of our student as she identified his body, and she just wept in my arms. And at that point, it hit me how much of an impact that we have, that and how short life can be, and how important it is that we do as much as we can to help each other, to be a college that is both welcoming and nurturing, and there in both good and bad, and available to our students for whenever we need to be available for them, and to set up positive opportunities for them, because at any given time something like this could happen to any of us. And I knew as a military officer, when I took over as a battalion commander, I was told that I had a 95% chance that I would bury at least one of my soldiers. I was very fortunate. I went through 2 years of battalion command and did not lose a single soldier. That was a pure fluke of luck. And now I found myself as a college president, never having thought that I would end up, I would be there standing in a morgue, with the mother of one of our students. And so, again, I think those are probably a couple of the defining moments, on different ends of the spectrum. But we have those in our lives. You'll find those as you go through things that, maybe they're not as dramatic, but there are times when you have that little epiphany and it hits you to say, wow, wait, this is what I ought to be doing, or this is what I could be doing with my life.
We do have a couple more minutes if anybody else has any questions for Colonel Volk. Again, you can ask, you can unmute yourself and ask, or ask through the chat. This is a great opportunity. We can't always get Colonel Volk on the line like this.
Yeah, this retirement stuff is hot. It's tough.
His schedule's booked.
I think I had to wear pants 3 times this week. I just want to say, do you have another question?
Nope, go ahead. Yep.
Okay, no, I was just going to say, I really appreciate this opportunity. I got to tell you that, again, I absolutely miss all of you guys. It's a great opportunity for me to kind of interact with you again. The timing is right. You got a great team of leaders there at the college. I know I worked with them all for years. It's a great team of leaders, and it was right time for them to take the college forward beyond where I could take it. But damn, I miss you guys every day. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully, as we get back in, and as we get through COVID and we start to hit, hopefully, athletics in the spring again, or whenever that might be, you'll see me there. I'll be out to come see you all again, because I absolutely love being with you there and seeing you all excel and how much you're all able to achieve.
Well, I think we're going to wrap this up, but Colonel Volk, we absolutely thank you for your time today. We thank you for, just the stories, regarding the veterans and your experiences there, and the leadership that you provided. This was a great experience for all of us, and I hope our student athletes were well in tune to the information that you provided. We absolutely miss you, And we absolutely look forward to, this spring to seeing you on the sidelines again and, right in the thick of things that, where we all belong.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Students, you guys are able to go today. We do have, just as a reminder, we have another Listen and Learn next Friday at 2:00, and that will be with our academic advisor, Rick Barone. So we're looking forward to hearing him speak next week. So that will be next Friday at 2:00. So thank you, Colonel Volk. We greatly appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you all again.
Thank you.